So I became familiar with the Enneagram through my brother several years ago. And it was one of those things I felt was pretty misunderstood. And in fact, one of his warnings to me was, you need to understand it, not just research it on the internet, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and it doesn't do it justice. I found it to be incredibly helpful, and that's how I found you. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what are some of the misunderstandings about the Enneagram and what it is and how it's valuable.
Yeah, well, speaking of brothers, my brother refers to the Enneagram as the enemagram, which is indicative of the relationship I have with my brother. Anyhow, moving on to your question. What was the question anyway? Yeah, I mean, the Enneagram, I mean, obviously there are questions about it, right? You know, oftentimes there's a certain segment of the population, right, that people get anxious, right? They get nervous. I was going to start my talk this morning in the workshop just simply by saying, welcome to New Canaan Society's first annual workshop on the pentagram.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I think it was the thing that was back on...
Only 6 people laughed when I said that. And everyone else went, see, I told you. I told you.
Yeah, that's just it. I was like, I've heard of this. We weren't allowed to buy a certain kind of toothpaste when I was a kid because it was demonic or something. You know, it's like, so it's a similar idea. Yeah, so let's
Lord Jesus, we pray for our brother.
I'll take it. So talk about just how this is misunderstood and kind of in straightening it out, why I think it's important.
Sure. So, you know, actually the Enneagram has Christian roots, and most people don't understand that. I think it's important because I think of the words of John Calvin, who opened the Institutes with this sentence: without knowledge of self, there is no knowledge of God. So let me repeat that because it's worth hearing again. Without knowledge of self, there is no knowledge of God. And so in a few instances when I've gotten pushback in the evangelical community, there's always this kind of, it just sounds like therapeutic, woo-woo kinds of, material, and, we don't want that kind of therapeuticized gospel leaking into the church. And I'm always like, well, just to be frank with you, in psychology, we call that kind of response resistance. and which makes sense. The great author Joseph Conrad once said, everybody wants to duck the grim shadow of self-knowledge. But I'm just telling you, without knowledge of self, there is no knowledge of God, because without knowledge of self, there is no awareness of our desperate need for grace. If you don't know your dark side, your shadow side, you're operating on autopilot, And so it's just so critical. And this was an early church teaching that seems to have been lost, but I think is finding its place in the world of understanding under the rubric of discipleship, that you must develop or attain self-knowledge. Otherwise, how will you know who God is? Yeah?
So, and when I came into it, I was sort of thinking, well, this is like your Myers-Briggs du jour. This is your strengths finders. This is your DISC test, the thing that we all kind of went through. And it's sort of like, well, this is what we're doing now. So we're all in a small group. We're all going to take this, and this will help us know each other better, which is a load of crap. So I came into it with kind of that idea, and what I found is that I think it's just one of the more balanced ways to see yourself, and that the tipping of that teeter-totter actually is the beginning of this journey towards a better understanding of like what God is calling us to and the parts of me that are denying Him. And that's what I think is so fascinating about it. So what's your thought on that?
Well, listen, I'm in favor of any personality measure like Strength Finders, Kolbe, Hogan, Myers-Briggs. Of course, who doesn't want to take a test called Strengths Finders? It's like, bring it. Tell me all about my strengths. Because, but really, in ways, what makes the Enneagram distinct, really, distinguishes it from all those other instruments, is actually, it could be called really shadow finder. It reveals that those dimensions of your personality that are in really opposition to the life that God wants us to live. It reveals to us really not only what's best about us is worst about us, and what's worst about us is what's best about us, but we have to know both sides, and I think that's what makes it unique. Yeah.
So Ian, you're working on a book right now that when we were talking about, I absolutely loved this idea, but more than just sort of, again, breaking down the 9, breaking down these various ways you see the world, interact with the world, you're taking on a different side to it. And I think for me, again, like the Enneagram reveals how we view, first of all, God, which is the kind of the whole matrix of how we're trying to see life. But additionally, I just think how we field things that come into our lives is a lot like, it's wind power. You don't know that it's there, but it's moving a tremendous amount of metal, and it's creating tremendous energy. And if we don't know that it's there, like you can't see it, you can't hear it, but it is driving huge parts of our lives. And we've heard today about these incredible ways that things that we are not aware of are driving parts of our lives. Yeah. And for you, again, in the narrative sort of style, when you were telling me about what you're working on now, I think that's of tremendous interest to what we're doing here this weekend.
So traditionally, the Enneagram has been a personality typology, right? It suggests that there are 9 basic personality types in the world. And within each of those personality types, there's an infinite variety of expressions, right? Now, what I have been struck by as I've studied the Enneagram over the years is it's not just about personality styles. These are really 9 stories that people tend to inhabit, right? In other words, these are, I love what a speaker said earlier about broken stories. These are broken stories. You know what I'm saying? They're broken stories. And, but as you said, the ego would like us to believe we are far more in control of our lives than we actually are. And so much of what controls our lives lives just beyond the fence line of our awareness. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is why we see repetitious patterns in our lives, and we keep going, I don't know, I keep trying to stop this behavior or this way of thinking or this way of feeling, but man, oh man, it just keeps coming around time and time again, and I just don't know where is the source of this. And what I would say is that so many of these hidden presences and forces live beneath the waterline of consciousness. And so much in the spiritual life is really about how do we bring this material above the waterline so we can go, aha, that's my game. That's the stuff I do. That's why I'm doing that, right? But you can't address these self-defeating, self-limiting behaviors, thoughts, feelings until you can see them. And so really what the Enneagram does is out them. And so that you can go, there you are. And now, once you know what that material is, that's controlling autonomously, because it has an autonomous power if you don't have an awareness of it. Once you can see it, now you can make different choices. You're no longer just kind of going on autopilot like Scooby-Doo in a trance through your life, No Scooby-Doo watchers in the room, huh? Everyone's playing golf. Everyone's playing golf on Saturday mornings while I'm at home watching Scooby-Doo, which I hope is a confidence builder for you, in terms of my life as a speaker. But anyhow, so that I hope people understand that these are stories. Now, do I think there's only 9 stories that people inhabit in the world? Heck, I don't know. But we see these 9 stories an awful lot, so we should really pay attention to them, right? So, I'm, in the world of literary critics would say there's only 7 basic plots in all of literature, in all of film. But we go see, romantic comedies, or I should say our wives want to go see romantic comedies all the time. And we never seem to tire of all the infinite varieties of sameness. Yeah. Right? So, yeah.
Well, and so one of the things, again, when we were talking about this, and I was saying, how would you sort of communicate this to a large audience? Like, this is something that does really well in a smaller workshop and this kind of thing. And I said, should we have people take a test before they come in so they kind of know their number, know their type, kind of understand a little bit of this going in? And one of your comments to me was about how little people actually are able to see of themselves to even answer the test correctly, which I thought was a very interesting observation about how we blind ourselves to that. So I think going into this next breakout that you're going to do on the Enneagram, how should people come into this with that idea about self-deception and the things we can't even see in ourselves?
Yeah, well, just to the point about tests, I'm a big believer as a therapist. I think there's lots of wonderful personality measures out there. The problem is that self-report assessments, when you take one, the test doesn't know whether you're self-aware enough to answer the questions accurately. The test doesn't know if you're completely drunk when you take it, It doesn't know if your girlfriend or guy friend is looking over your shoulder while you're answering the questions and you're going, oh, what do you want me to be? And you're just like filling it out to create a persona for the other person, right? So, I think that, we duck self-knowledge. Here's the deal. I think most people say, well, of course I want to get to know myself. I hope some people say that. And I want to have self-knowledge. But the truth of the matter is most people only want about $3 worth of self-knowledge. Right? Who really wants to go deep into the shadow and find out what's in there? Basically nobody. And most of us don't until we hit a crash. I love this idea that I believe that the first half of life is really, it could be correlated to it's really the parable of the talents. In the first half of life, what we're doing is we're trying to unearth all of our gifts and talents and utilize them and create dividends, right? And it's about proving our adequacy to the world and to ourselves. And I believe that the second half of life is the parable of the prodigal son. It's about coming home. It's about forgiveness. It's about the soul, not about proving ourselves. So, actually, I've completely forgotten the question, but...
It's about the quality of self-assessment and memory, I think.
Well, but what I went into was... I can make you cry.
I believe you. I really do. Yeah.
I have that gift. I have the spiritual gift of that and discouragement. But anyway, so
we're back to self-assessment.
Thank you
quality.
so much.
Okay, here we go.
In media training, they always say answer the question you want to, not the one that's posed. Anyhow, so. I think that self-assessments are fine, but I think the best way to do this is in the context of teaching, workshops, actually being able to unpack it for people. We'll do some Q&A, I hope, during the workshop so that we can address questions that people actually have. I won't have to guess what they are. And, again, I think that tests are only probably accurate about 55-60% of the time. So there's a significant margin of error. And really, the only way you can know your type is to self-verify. Only you know who you are. The test doesn't know who you are. It can't even come close to accounting for the complexity of the human person.
Yeah. I've had a couple of experiences with it where, first of all, people will always tell me what number they think I am.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm positive that's not who I am because my self-biased assessment is spot on, right? So I'm sure that I'm not that. And I've also had people say, man, I wish I was a 7. I wish that I was more of a 3.
I bet you do.
No, I don't. And so, but I think I don't know, it's an interesting sort of longing because what they're seeing is they're seeing only one dimension of this other kind of style of living life, interpreting life, that kind of stuff. And talk about just your sense of people longing. It seems like it's an out of balance understanding of what this is. If you're longing for the quality of something else, you're not actually doing this right and appreciating what is in you that was created in you.
Yes. Well, thank you for answering your own question.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
My self-bias is excellent.
Yeah.
So.
I will make you cry, and I've got 11 seconds. Yeah, I mean, all of us, in this life, at some point, wish we were other than what we are. Right? All of us would prefer to be someone else. We all carry an idealized self against which we measure our value and our worth, don't we? So don't we all have someone in our mind who's like, oh man, if I could just be that guy, then I will have reached the pinnacle of my authentic selfhood. But that's really an affront to the God who created us.
Well, that's good.
You're not a mistake. Well, most of us aren't. Look, you're puddling.
I'm starting to tear up.
Look, he's puddling. Oh, it's so good. Love to make people decompensate in front of large crowds. It's good.
I love having you here this weekend. It's been a lot of fun to.
By the way, you're a 3, right?
I am a 3.
And you know that the primary deadly sin of the 3 is deception,
Deceit,
right?
yes.
So thank you for practicing that.
Yes.
Just right there as an
So
example.
anyway, come on up, and Ian's going to strip you down naked in front of 500 of your closest friends, and I think it's going to be great. This is what I'm supposed to say. You are going to do this here in the breakout afterwards, where Ian's going to talk a little bit more about the Enneagram and about these kind of 9 storylines we're living in, which I think will be a very beneficial opportunity. So during the breakouts, if you want to be with Ian, you could be here, and hopefully you'll get a chance to get dressed down, because that is super fun. So Ian, thanks for being with us, buddy. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, man.